Secretly recorded from deep inside the bowels of a decommissioned missile silo, we bring you the man, one single man who wants to bring light to the darkness and dark to the lightness. Although he's not always right, he is always certain. So now, with security protocols in place, the protesters have been forced back behind the barricades and the blast doors are now sealed. Without further delay, let me introduce you to the host of Hutcast, Mr. Tim Hutner.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. You can now take your post.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the individual and participants. These views and opinions expressed do not represent those of the host or the show. The opinions in this broadcast are not to replace your legal, medical, or spiritual professionals.
Welcome to Hutcast. Today on the show, via phone, to my undisclosed bunker location, Ron Berutti. And Ron, are you there?
I am.
Give us a sneak peek real quick. We're in the intro, but who are we talking about today?
Well, today we are talking about my submission to the United States Supreme Court. In particular, it's going to Justice Sotomayor. And the petition is designed, it's an emergency application seeking to get the Trump gag order stayed on behalf of my media client whose First Amendment rights have been violated by it.
Okay. All right, you guys want to stand by for this one. Tune in, get some popcorn. It's going to be a show. We'll be right back.
Buying a gun is no ordinary purchase. Whether you're a hunter, competitive shooter, or self-defense is your priority, there are many kinds of guns and many kinds of training programs. You use your brain all the time. You will rarely need to use your gun. Before you find yourself in a situation where you need to make a critical decision, make sure your training is the best you can get. It could be the difference between life and death, or freedom or detention. For the best quality training, check out permittocarry.us. If you live in Minnesota or Wisconsin or even Florida, give Gene German a call, 612-388-2403. That's Permit to Carry US. Or call Gene German at 612-388-2403.
Welcome back to Hutcast. Ron Berutti is here, and he has got some way big information. Ron, you had said in pre-roll that this emergency stay for Donald Trump's client, media client, where are we going with this?
Well, this is actually my media client. We are not working with the Donald Trump or the Trump campaign. This is my media client is a podcaster, much like you, Good Logic LLC. Good Logic does legal podcasting, and based out of New Jersey, New York. My client, Good Logic's owner is Joe Neerman. He's an attorney also, but not a constitutional attorney. And Joe retained my firm to represent his entity and to bring claims in the New York Court of Appeals or New York appellate courts to try to, against Judge Merchan, who entered the gag order, seeking to get the courts to compel Judge Merchan to stay his order and allow President Trump to speak.
Wow. So in a nutshell, your customer, your client, is being gagged himself?
No. So under the First Amendment, there's a news gathering right, and one of the things that the gag order has done is it's prevented news organizations from actually going to the source to get news. There's a First Amendment right, and never before in our nation's history has there been, before President Trump in the federal case in D.C., never have we found a case where there's been a gag order imposed against a criminal defendant for the purpose of gagging that criminal defendant. Usually, or every time in the past, gag orders have been imposed to protect the integrity of the trial so that the criminal defendant will get a fair trial. So what they've done is by entering this gag order, and typically, of course, the criminal defendant has every opportunity and every right to declare his innocence, speak about the trial, speak about the judge, speak about whatever he wants, because it's his liberty, potentially life, that is on the line.
Okay.
And the press has therefore a right to report it. And by entering the gag order, the right of the press, the free press, to report on these things, we claim has been violated.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty big battle.
It's been really an amazing battle to see how things transpired in the New York courts, and to now see now to be taking it to the United States Supreme Court. It's exciting, and we think we have a very, very good case. And whether Justice Sotomayor sees it that way, or some other justice, which could be the case later on, we don't know. But we think we're making very important legal arguments, constitutional arguments, and this is not a frivolous thing at all. We're very serious with this application we're bringing.
Right. You want everybody to hear about this. This is how we got together, and we're in 101 countries. We got a whole lot of listeners, but we a lot of our people are overseas. I would say 40% are onshore, which is a pretty good number. How do you want them to interpret this?
So what I want that I want the court to be aware that the world is watching, that this is we're in the midst of a presidential campaign. I think we're 34 days away now from the election.
Mm-hmm.
And something extraordinary happened with President Trump being convicted of crimes in a courtroom in New York, felonies, by a judge who we say was irreconcilably conflicted. And the judge caused criticism of him to be tamped by entering this gag order, because we think he was conflicted because of his daughter and his wife, who have what we say are conflicts of interest, or cause him to have conflicts of interest, which should have required him to recuse himself under New York law. He should never have been the presiding judge, yet he was, and President Trump, in an unprecedented, something that's completely unprecedented in American history, was convicted of felonies in New York.
So if it's that big of a conflict of interest, can't you call him out on that, and can't you change venue at that point?
Well, look, I was not the attorney for President Trump. I do believe that they tried that. I haven't seen their papers, but Judge Merchan obviously disagreed, and then Judge Merchan gagged President Trump. And it was around that same time that news reports came out about Judge Merchan's daughter, who we understand news report since the trial has indicated that his daughter, for those who don't know, is I think she's a publicist. She has got a publicist company, and one of her clients is none other than the Biden-Harris campaign, or was the Biden-Harris campaign.
Okay.
So you can't make this stuff up. And this last quarter, when the quarter during which the trial was occurring, there's a news report saying that her company made something on order of $12.4 million more than it had made the prior year in that same quarter. Now, why would that be? And it seems that there's a pecuniary benefit from having your father being the trial judge for Donald Trump. And that's exactly the kind of conflict that we're saying required Judge Merchan to recuse himself. Furthermore, his wife, Judge Merchan's wife, works for Letitia James. Letitia James is the Attorney General of New York. She campaigned, and there is a video of her campaigning talking about Donald Trump in a bullhorn: lock him up, lock him up. Well, again, if that's not a conflict of interest for Judge Merchan, I don't know what is. So he has this two-pronged conflict of interest. And what he did is he gagged President Trump from talking about his wife and his daughter. So the person with the biggest microphone in the world is President Trump. I'd say there's probably no one who's ever had a larger media presence than Donald Trump, and I put this in my papers. And of course, when you prevent that person from speaking out about this conflict of interest, the public is largely uninformed. Many of your listeners, maybe you yourself, are hearing this for the first time right now.
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
Why is that? Because President Trump was gagged.
I knew there was a gag order in place, but I didn't know what for. And this is what it's for.
Yeah, that's what we say. That supposedly, the gag order was put in place because President Trump was saying words that were dangerous. He was going to scare people from coming to be witnesses, and he was going to make people uncomfortable, and it was going to upset the trial. Well, that's not a reason to gag someone. Under the Supreme Court precedent, there must be a clear and present danger, an imminent threat to the trial. And the only way I've argued in the Supreme Court that the only way that a criminal defendant can be gagged for the purpose of gagging him, I would say, is if there is some indication that perhaps the defendant is intending to tamper with the jury with words. And let's just take case of a mobster. Hey, I'm going to have you killed if you go against me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see gagging that. That's something that's threatening the case completely, and it's could be potentially imminent. But here, there was nothing imminent. The court didn't go through the process that it was required to go through to determine imminence, and and it didn't even apply that standard. It applied a lesser standard because it wanted to gag President Trump, and it relied upon the standard that had been imposed against him in the D.C. court. The federal court in D.C. Was the first court to enter an order like this, but there was no conflict like there is in New York. So we've argued there have been in the past there have been other cases. The D.C. court went to the D.C. Circuit Court, which is the appeals court. They upheld it. They affirmed the D.C. Circuit. And in the past, there's another circuit court has said, if there's trial publicity and it's inconvenient for the defense, tough luck. This isn't about making life easy for the defense. This is about protecting the criminal defendant's rights. We say that circuit court got it right, the D.C. Circuit got it wrong, and New York court could not rely upon the D.C. Circuit because the D.C. Circuit got it wrong. And so that's basically the gist of the argument. And on top of that, the layer on top of that is that this particular gag order was really in an effort to really protect Judge Merchan against the criticism of his conflict of interest, which was a gross violation of New York law, we allege.
Who else is bringing this out?
Well, nobody. You would think that, and this is good logic, and Joe Neerman, this was his idea, and he said, wait a minute, something's very wrong with this picture. And why isn't the whole media, why aren't all the media coming out and banging on pots and pans and saying you can't do this? Well, because I think we know that the legacy media has become something similar to Pravda, where they're cheerleading, and so they're not going to go do it. They didn't, no one has reported on these conflicts in the major news media organizations, so they're certainly not going to go and try to argue that it's a violation of their constitutional rights. And then many other people just didn't think about it. So Joe Neerman thought about it, and I think it was brilliant. And here we are.
Doesn't Fox have any teeth in this?
They do not. Nobody. It's Joe Neerman.
Are they aware?
A little guy. Sorry?
Are they aware of this, Fox News?
I do not know. I don't have contacts with Fox News, and they should certainly be aware of it. Again, they're a major news organization.
Right.
It's hard to fathom how major news organizations have let this go and have not really pursued this story at all. But then again, there are a lot of big stories that aren't pursued, and it's the culture that's been developed probably over the past 10, 20 years, where the media has become something very different than what a lot of us grew up with.
Right.
These are the things, when I was a kid, we you used to see Pravda, and you see the Soviet Union news, and you'd laugh at what they're saying, but you'd wonder if these poor people in the Soviet Union like even believed it or what. But you see now here in the United States, they're doing the same thing. It's a lot of propaganda, and we have a country divided with a news media that is pumping up one side or maybe the other with propaganda a lot of times.
Sure.
And news stories are not being discussed. You used to have point counterpoints on news programs, right?
Right.
Let's think about Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, right? You would have a point counterpoint, and you'd have debate, and you'd have argument, and you let the people decide, who's right, who's wrong. Are they both wrong? Are they both right? You don't have that anymore. You just have, you have biased news in the main media organizations for the most part, and the real news stories that really need to be peeled back, where the layers need to be peeled back, are not being handled many cases.
You feel that's a democratic thing, or do you feel it's both, and everybody's taking a little bit of ownership there?
Well, look, I think that it's primarily on the left, but look, I think that there's certainly, I think Fox News has, I think there are a lot of things that Fox News never answered for with what happened in 2020. And there are other major news organizations too. Where's Newsmax? Where's OAN on this? I haven't seen it. Maybe they've talked about it. I haven't seen it. And it's a major story. The news is out there. There are some journalists out there who have reported on it. I know Laura Loomer is the one who pointed out the wife conflict. There are some people who have actually reported on this story, but they don't have the megaphone, and they're considered to be fringe, and they're treated as being people who are not serious, but they're actually raising the serious questions. They're the conspiracy theories. So
Sure.
We see that all the time, that the conspiracy theories seem to be coming true eventually,
Right.
Almost every time.
More and more. Every time you turn around, it's a conspiracy. Oh, no, it ain't. It's you just haven't seen it yet.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. And like
It
you said,
really
you can't write this.
No, it's really 1984 stuff.
Yes. Some Orwell.
It really is.
Total Orwellian.
Yeah.
And if nobody's read that book, Orwell, you need to. You need to just go back and read it and just, you're going to be floored. Now,
1984, yeah.
Yeah. I know that in our presidential debate last night, our vice presidential debate, Vance handed him his ass. Totally. It wasn't even fair. But a lot of people don't know what we know here in Minnesota about Walz. And the
Please
news.
tell us.
What's that? Oh, please
Tell us.
Yeah, I've got a lot of listeners at our state capitol that are on this program. And one in particular, and this is just to cement your position about the news and how you don't hear nothing, and then magically delicious stuff happens. Behind the veil, Paul E. Gazelka, he is the Senate Majority Leader of Minnesota for many years. He has been toe-to-toe with Tim Walz, and he can tell you some stories in his new book he just released here 2 weeks ago. He was on the show. He says, guys, you don't understand until you've actually been in a room with this guy. Things the news didn't kick out there. Things that happened. Liz Collins, she is a WCCO, let me correct that, was an anchor for WCCO. Now she's running Alpha News, and she was on the show. Her husband, her husband was the guy on the phone when George Floyd's police was on his neck. I mean, Derek Chauvin was on his neck. Chauvin's on the phone. He's talking to this guy, and this guy he's talking to is her husband. He's the police, Minneapolis Police Union rep. The news totally destroyed that. Use of force was authorized. He was doing the right thing. The only thing that got Derek in trouble was he didn't flip him over and make sure he was still breathing. If he was still breathing, or at least tried to, I don't think those guys would be in trouble. My point is, the news just spun this around. They're lying to us was her book. She released it on this show. And it was a killer book. No pun intended. Yeah, incredible. So I can see your point with this, or your client's point. And what is the hope? I mean, so they lift the gag order and they can talk about it then?
Well, if they lift the gag order, President Trump can talk about it. So in a strange way, we're actually making arguments for President Trump. It's not really
By proxy?
again. We're not working. Yeah, it's a collateral attack. They call it on this order.
Okay.
The attack is based initially on our client's First Amendment right to free press, but tangentially and probably in overarching really is how this particular gag order violated President Trump's First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it violated his 6th and 14th Amendment rights to a fair trial. So if Good Logic had been able to, and Good Logic had put questions to President Trump about conflicts, and Good Logic had requested an interview with President Trump, and Good Logic was turned down because of the gag order. So Good Logic has standing to raise these issues, and its rights were violated by the gag order. And once it raised the issues, then it also brings into focus what happened with President Trump. And I know President Trump, his people have filed in the New York courts have sought to argue that the gag order was illegal and unconstitutional. I haven't really seen their arguments. They've gone nowhere so far in that. And I don't know how focused they are on at this point. I mean, they're 34 days away from an election.
Yeah, right.
But look, at the end of the day, the American people are going to be casting what could be the most important electoral votes in our nation's history.
Yep.
Or maybe as far back as 1864 or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is a big one, and they should be informed properly, or they should be able to reach their own conclusions as to what actually happened in this criminal trial. And my personal take is that what happened is that this was a sham. That President Trump the convictions were the goose was cooked before the fire was turned on, and I think that he stood no chance, and they did everything they could to make sure that he stood no chance.
And the theys are who?
I think the courts. I think it's I argued in New York. I'm a New York attorney, and I'm a very firm believer in our law and in the rule of law. I don't think that the appellate courts wanted to touch this, and I don't believe that this judge was unbiased. And I think it's a terrible look for the New York courts not to have done something to stop this from happening, because ultimately it damages the integrity of every single case, as I see it, before the courts. It adds the question is the outcome political? And that's not what courts exist to do.
Right. And
if we cannot have a court that we believe in, the judicial system that we believe is going to be fair, unbiased, and neutral, then our entire rule of law is going to be on the brink of collapse. And that's really very dangerous. And that's why this particular case, we think, needs to be heard by the Supreme Court and needs to be examined very closely, because, again, our institutions are under attack. And this is a grave injustice that occurred and a grave danger to our Constitution.
You struck a chord there. You said our institutions are under attack. What's new? We're always under attack as conservatives.
It's not just conservatives. I think that I think if you look really across our society, and again, this isn't what my case is about, but I'm also an observer of, and I have a lot of I have a lot of big cases against a lot of powerful entities and people. That's what I do. You see that everywhere from our religious institutions to our corporate institutions,
history,
to small business, to everything is under attack.
Yes.
And my grandfather escaped communism in 1948, and I learned, he risked everything. He put his family on a 10 horsepower boat and went across the sea, one of the first people to escape. And he just had to be free. He couldn't live in a society that was false and that didn't allow him to be a free person. He had to risk everything to do it. And I look now and I say, where are we going in this country? And where do my grandkids go? Where does their 10 horsepower boat
Sure.
take them to?
Yeah. Where's their safe haven?
This is the, as I think it was Reagan who said, this is the last best hope on earth, and we have to fight to preserve it. And that's what I do every day, pretty much in my job. I fight to preserve our institutions. I fight to preserve what I think is the constitutional, correct, applications of the law. And this is a big one. This is a very big one.
So what do you see? Where did you come from? The family?
My family?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your grandfather?
Yeah. So my grandfather was Yugoslavian. At the time it was, he's Croatian, but at the time it was Yugoslavia, 1948.
Okay.
It was right after World War II. He had, my grandfather's my hero. He was a phenomenal pastry chef and also chef. And he just wanted to work, and he ended up running a hotel on an island in Croatia, then Yugoslavia, and it's kind of off the beaten path from the war. But at one point, the SS came to the island to get all the able-bodied men, and my grandfather outsmarted the SS to avoid capture. And then he had to leave the island, and then he ended up with the partisans who were communists, and he hated them just as much, and he deserted the communists, and he hid the rest of the war up in the attic of his home. But then when he came out, he would refuse to join the Communist Party, and they took his hotel away, and then they told him that they're going to take his home away because he wouldn't join the party, and he's going to leave his family homeless, and he figured a way to escape. And just an amazing human being, and to talk to him about it, he was very humble about it. He goes, "That's just one story. There's so many stories," and he never really thought there was anything really special about what he did, but boy, was there.
When I first started this about 4.5 years ago, I had a gal on, and one of our first shows was the year I met Adolf Hitler. Now, this gal's in her 90s-ish, and she's spry as can be, and the memories that go back are such a scar. And I'll tell you what, I mean, she's 90-some years old. I felt like a total crud, like, hey, let's talk about this, and it was so like yesterday for her. My point with this is, if we don't study the past, we're certainly condemned to the future. It's nothing new to that. And how can we, as a society, again, you cross the pond, listeners, you might have some of this in your world, but how do we as a society say enough of this and stomp our feet? I mean, do we have to have another January 6th? I mean, you tell me what makes sense.
Well, listen, I believe in the rule of law, and I believe in our Constitution, and I believe in our courts still, and I believe that the United States, with all of its flaws, still is the best system, and it's the one that has made people the freest and therefore the most prosperous and ultimately the happiest people in the history of the world. And it's, one thing that I'm kind of fascinated about is that there's so very few attorneys who are fighting the fights that I fight. You have entities, you have like America First Legal, or you have various organizations that bring lawsuits, say, for vaccines or for DEI, whatever. And I'm doing all those things. But they're very few because and people don't want to work for my firm. They think, oh, you're a right-wing conspiracy.
Oh, sure.
I'm just a person I'm just a regular guy, and I went to a pretty humble law school. I think that I'm pretty smart, and I think that I make good arguments. But I'm not an Ivy League guy, and I didn't have the great thinkers as my professors. But here I am. I understand that my role in society as a lawyer is to do what I took an oath to do, which is to uphold the Constitution and laws. And that's what I ask the courts to do every day. And there's such reticence in the community of laws now that to even take these positions because people are afraid of being canceled.
Yes.
People are afraid of being mocked. People are afraid of being disbarred. In some states, all these people who are going against the vaccines, they're getting their bar licenses threatened.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's
then what good's our law?
not,
What good's our law if we can't protect it with ourselves?
Well, that's my point is, look, I have an obligation to continue fighting this fight. I feel that it's my moral duty. It's my duty to do this. And I can't spend my days worrying about what if that happens, because I know what I'm doing is ethical and I know what I'm doing is legal. I don't file frivolous claims. And if somebody wants to attack me for that, I can't stop them from doing that. But I'm not going to be bullied into refusing to defend or failing to defend the rights of my clients and the Constitution and laws of the United States. And I do believe that ultimately this is all going to turn around. I believe that in my heart that this is going to turn around. And I believe the Supreme Court is going to take a greater and greater role in doing that. And I think the last few terms of the Supreme Court, I think we've seen that, where the court is starting to take some of these issues on and starting to really turn back this insanity that's been going on in our country.
God, I hope so. I hope so. Because, you said something about the guys taking the jab. Well, in Minnesota here, we had a candidate against Walz. And an excellent candidate, a very excellent candidate, a doctor. He's anti-jab. He's pro-patient. And it's Dr. Scott Jensen. He's been on the show a couple times.
I've spoken to Scott Jensen. I know him, sure.
Oh, okay. And all they did was attack him. They attacked him. They bullied him. They went after his license time and time and time again. And I do believe he's fighting one of those in court right now.
Yeah, that's what they do. And again, they have the legacy media on their side. You don't see unbiased reporting. You just see.
You see what they want you to see. You're being programmed.
It's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
it's a conspiracy theory, and once they say it's a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy theory. Once they say you're a right-wing lunatic, you're a right-wing lunatic. They don't tell you that they don't say talk about left-wing lunatics.
Right.
Of course not, because there are no left-wing lunatics.
Not according to them.
Perfectly sane and sober people. It's really kind of frightening, when you really boil it down. And I worry about my kids, and especially, I don't have grandkids yet. I'm 58. I have 3 beautiful older kids, and I got 2 young guys at home, and I wonder, I wonder what their lives are going to be like when they're 58, and what are their kids going to be faced with? Because I've just seen from the time that my older kids to the time now we're in school, things have changed so dramatically and so much for the worse, and schools have become these cesspools of left-wing politics theory,
indoctrinations.
It's we fight. We got cases against a lot of the transgender madness in schools. My wife was arrested at a school board meeting for not having a mask on.
Really?
We have a trial next week. Yes, we have a trial next week for her not having a mask on Valentine's Day 2022. We took that case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Court didn't take it, but we believe that she had an absolute constitutional protest right to not wear a mask. Yep. And after 8 months of doing the same thing, they finally arrested her when the mask mandate was about to end because they wanted to get their pound of flesh. It's scary. And her protest was for special needs kids. And that's something I remember watching, watching the movie Rain Man, right, in 1989, and I'd never heard of autism. Well, what is this?
Dustin
this can't
Hoffman.
Be real. Yeah, this can't be real. And we've got an autistic child, and it seems like 2 out of every 3 people I know is an autistic child now. And this is the Bobby Kennedy thing. And I'm so glad that he endorsed President Trump, because he's really a brilliant guy, and he really cares about this issue, and he's at the vanguard of this issue and the vaccines and everything else. And we need to. These are issues that need to be dealt with, and nobody's doing it, and no one wants to talk about it.
Right.
The media doesn't.
Yep.
Want to talk
they all
about
climb
it,
out, including some of the people you just go out and talk to. They don't want to engage it.
Hey, the media said that vaccines don't cause injuries, so the vaccines don't cause injuries.
Yeah.
The politicians have said vaccines don't cause injuries, so vaccines don't cause injuries. There's no desire to peel back the rhetoric and to look beneath the surface and say, wait a minute, how can you say vaccines don't cause injuries? I don't know if you've ever dealt with Steve Kirsch, for instance. Steve Kirsch is a very wealthy guy. I think he invented the mouse for computers. I think that was his big invention. But he got vaccinated, and then he started looking into these COVID vaccines, and he is the single most the biggest anti-vax advocate that there is. He's willing to bet, I'll bet you $1 million. You and I have a debate, and I'll win the debate on the vaccines. He gets all the information, and he aggregates it, and he talks about all these different studies, and you would think with all this massive information that there would be people in government saying, well, wait a minute, this is a serious guy, and this is a serious issue, and we need to really take a look at it. No, they're trying to silence him. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's a nut.
Mm-hmm.
That's their take, and of course he's not.
He's
a brilliant man.
Yeah, Walz did some of that here in Minnesota. I was on conversations with restaurant owners, people, places of gathering. I mean, and I had my docket was full of interviews just on what happened, and they tried to arrest him, just like your wife. They couldn't pin it on them, but they did go through the motions. Did your wife get out of it, or how did that end up?
She was arrested. She actually, what was really interesting is she actually filed a federal lawsuit before being arrested, because the month before at the school board meeting, they canceled the meeting so that she couldn't speak.
Oh.
And then they started threatening publicly that anyone coming without a mask was going to be arrested. Now, she'd been doing this for 8 months, coming without a mask, and hadn't gotten arrested, as had other people. But they just wanted to make people comply. It's a power grab.
Yep.
And she said no. Her protest was that the masks were hurting her child. Her child couldn't learn. Another child was getting sick from licking the inside of the mask as a 5-year-old, and the doctor's notes, and she had gone through all the proper channels to try to, get some relief with medical notes, et cetera, and they just ignored it. And so her protest was to the school board. These are the people closest to our system of government was designed that we would be able to speak to the people closest to us, our neighbors, because they would care about us. Well, here you have a school board, and that we were supposed to have a bottom-up government, right? Which, of course, now has been completely inverted, where everything comes from the top now, and the people in the local school board now are just little pawns of some bigger machine, it seems. So what happened here is she said, look, you need to contact the governor and try to get some relief, because kids with special needs are being harmed, and there are a lot of them. And so, like I said, she filed a lawsuit, trying to get an injunction preventing them from going through with their arrest, saying they should have a constitutional right to protest, et cetera. And the police came and tried to force her to put on a mask, which she politely refused. She was always polite, always dignified, and they just slapped cuffs on her and arrested her. So October 11th, we have a trial after 2 years of waiting.
Oh, man.
2.5 years of waiting. Yeah.
So do you predict just a stay movement? How do you feel it's going to turn out?
Oh, I don't. I'm certainly not going to predict my client's fate. It's also my wife. We're gonna fight. We're going to fight this. There's a lot of interest in it. I think that people are going to show up. I hope they do, and they should, because this I don't know about I'm sure it's happening in Minnesota because I know it's happening in pretty much every state. These school boards
Yep.
are becoming tyrannical.
Oh, for sure.
And this has to happen. We have to punch back. We have to fight back legally, peacefully, legally. We have to fight back. We cannot allow them to just trample our rights without making them realize that people are not going to sit back and take it. Because once they take your right a little bit, then they're going to take it a little bit more.
Yep.
It never stops. That's
Yep.
the history. That's the history of mankind. And
they need $1, so they ask for 10, negotiate down to 5. And all you want to do is give them $1 at that point just to get them out of your way. It's constant like that.
They negotiate down to 5, but they actually take 15. It's
when they only needed $1.
They didn't even need $1.
Yeah, right. We have one of those in our city.
They needed to give you $1 is what they needed to do.
Yes. Yeah, and they're so over grabbing. Now, I hope your wife gives them some kung fu on this deal.
Well, we have our defense strategy is being developed, and I'm certainly not going to discuss it. But we certainly would love to have people come down to the courthouse in Cranford, New Jersey, on October 11th, Friday at 9 a.m. and come sit in the courtroom and come give my wife some support and me some support and give freedom some support too, because that's what this is really about. Again, it's about fighting for freedom and fighting for our children and fighting for what's right. And when a school board has a parent of a special needs child arrested, taken away in handcuffs because she doesn't have a face diaper on, something's very wrong. Something is very wrong.
Yep. You tell her we're rooting for her here at Hutcast and in my 101 countries, okay?
You got it.
And if you're in Jersey,
in every language,
in 7 languages,
yes.
We're translating 7 languages. I know that for sure. So whatever that is, I hope she just gives it that, just hammers it down on them. But I talked to some Democratic friends. And they're like old school Dems. So they're like today's Republicans. They just don't know their party left them. And I say, so we have constitutional talks all the time. And I said, so what do you think of our Constitution? Well, it's a living, breathing document. I says, since when? Well, it has to change as time changes.
Well, that's not a constitution. As I will give credit where it's due. Mark Levin. I've learned so much from listening to Mark Levin. He's really a brilliant constitutional guy, and he says a living, breathing constitution is a dead constitution, and he's right. Once the Constitution is essentially a contract. If you have a contract and the terms constantly change, well, you don't have a contract,
right?
And that's what it's the same with the Constitution. The Constitution has a fixed meaning. Just because times change doesn't mean the meaning of the Constitution changes. It just means that the world has to be governed in terms of what the Constitution requires, and it's a Constitution designed to limit government. You can't be free without limited government, and if you want to change that, then there's a constitutional amendment process, and the 14th Amendment was great for that. It made vast changes to our country in 1865 or 64, but I think it was 65 was passed. It changed things very dramatically because there had been a civil war, right? And but that's still ultimately the 14th Amendment still is it's a fixed constellation. It's not it's not a moving target, and we have to respect the Constitution, or we have no government at all. Ask your progressive friends, or if you have any more, because they tend to not want to be your friend anymore once they find out what you believe or what you think. We've lost tons of friends and family. 2 very close family have stopped talking to us, and it's just part of the deal. Like, okay, I'm sorry, that's the way you feel. You can't get politics out of the way.
Yeah.
we can't have an honest disagreement. But you ask them what is the limit of government? What is the federal government's limit? What can the federal government not do? And you'll be very hard pressed to get an answer. Well, they can't tell you have to have an abortion, or you can't have an abortion. Well, okay, so let's pretend that's right. But how about in terms of spending? How about in terms of passing laws to affect the country? How about in terms of anything?
Setting policy.
And they believe in unlimited government.
You're right.
And what they believe in is tyranny.
Yes,
it's tyranny. They believe in, that's what they believe in. They believe in dictatorship and tyranny. And if you don't have a limited government, you don't have freedom. It's that simple. Everything the government does, every law passed takes a little bit of freedom away.
Yes.
Every single law, every single regulation takes a little bit of someone's freedom away. That's the absolute reality. And here we have these albatross laws and these masses of regulations, and there's no end to them because nobody is holding government to account in terms of its limitations, its constitutional limitations. I shouldn't say nobody, but it's very difficult.
Right. We have a good group here in Minnesota. The right side is right, and there's a lot of guys on the left side who are still fighting for the right stuff too. I mean, it's the progressive crazies, the socialist, communist left party. That is just
absolutely
out of control. They're out of control.
Yeah.
And I do believe that Walz is one of those.
From what I've read and seen, I he's coming across as the folksy common guy. But
wrong.
That's the facade. And I think that you could kind of see that facade melting away yesterday at times when he didn't seem to have he couldn't find that pre-programmed answer and call himself a knucklehead.
Right, exactly. And if we're listening to him as long as I have, he's probably 40 miles from us in this undisclosed location, and he don't get it. He don't get it. And when he started imposing these restrictions on businesses around here, he started doing him and the Mayor Fry, Jacob Fry, would for this George Floyd thing. It's too bad the guy died. I get it. But the cops didn't call themselves to that location. And then he goes out and Fry calls the cop a killer. I mean, day one. And he sat back. Then the riot started.
Yeah, look, that was my take on it all is that the greatest disservice done was those cops did the greatest disservice to our country because look what happened. I mean, it was foolish. I don't pretend to know all the facts, but you just see that the fallout has been horrific for our country and
incredible.
What I have heard is that your governor's wife said that she opened the windows to the governor's mansion because she was happy to smell the burning city. I mean, that to me is unconscionable, and it tells you everything you need to know.
She'd change her mind if it was her building burning.
I wouldn't be married to that person.
Yeah.
If I didn't believe that way, I wouldn't be married to that person, right? So you have to. That to me tells me everything I need to know about Governor Walz right there. And I don't like it one bit.
Yeah, no. I mean, we've known this for years around here, but all of a sudden, first of all, Camilla was installed. You don't go from number 11 in the DNC to not having a DNC to being picked because your president, who mentally couldn't make it in the first place, is all of a sudden now she's the magic trick is going to be everybody thinking their job is to make everybody think that she was the right pick, that she was picked when she was actually installed.
She's the chosen one. She was chosen for this. Wasn't elected. She was chosen.
Then the democratic process is no good.
Well, that's again, it's unlimited government. It's complete lack of respect for the Constitution and for the people.
Right.
That's what that is, and that's the party. That's the party, and they call themselves Democrats. There's nothing democratic about it.
Not at all.
I said years ago, if you looked at the CPUSA website, Communist Party USA website, and you saw the positions they had, they are, you can almost do an exact layover of the Democrat policies. They're the same policies, but they just call themselves Democrats, not communists.
Yeah.
It's look, policy wise, there's not a whole lot of difference. There's not a whole lot of daylight between them. And it's getting worse and worse, with the censorship and everything else. But we do these cases all the time. This is what we do, and I see all these issues, and I fight these issues, and sometimes you think you're pushing against a string, but other times, you're landing a punch here and there, and that's all we can hope for. Land punches.
Playing pool with a wet spaghetti noodle, huh?
Yeah, I could tell you about I was one of my first big cases in my first big constitutional case. I really was a lawyer who did like complex commercial work, fraud cases, and racketeering cases, and that kind of thing. One of my first big constitutional cases, we sued Mayor de Blasio in New York when he put in his vaccine mandate to get into restaurants and gyms, etc. Okay. And what happened? If you look at the court cases, we lost the case. The case was ultimately dismissed. But what they did is it was filed in federal court, and so every time we got close to getting a hearing, they would withdraw a part of the mandate and say, "Okay, the case is moot now; it has to be dismissed. You can't. There's nothing to decide." And they said, "No, wait, but there's this other mandate that's the same thing." So 3 times that happened that we got close to a decision, and they pulled a mandate, they pulled another mandate, then they pulled a third mandate. And each time they argued that it was moot. The third time, they finally succeeded in federal court. You have to have an act of controversy. If there's no controversy anymore, the federal court has no jurisdiction. So that's what they're trying to moot it. They're trying to say the court has no jurisdiction because they got rid of that mandate. And say, well, no, there's another mandate. Like, for instance, I have one eye on my Mets game right here, and I said, well, the baseball teams in New York are not going to be able to have their unvaccinated players play under this other mandate that you have, and it's the same mandate as essentially the one that you have in a restaurant. So the issue's not moot; it still exists, and it's likely to happen again. Boom! Mayor Adams made a special exemption for sports teams, which was outrageous. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, they said it's moot. I go, no, but wait a minute. You have this other mandate. You have employees have to be vaccinated. Employees of private employers have to be vaccinated, and it's the same thing. And boom, they pulled that one away too.
Sure.
So I feel like, well, the record may show that we lost, but I think we won a lot. I think and that makes me feel good. Like we did something that was really important to the people, and we upheld constitutional rights. It may be a little too late, but we took that fight to them, and you can't be afraid to take the fight to them.
For a takeaway, what do you want people to know? How do they engage at their level? We're not attorneys. We're dishwashers, and we're gas pumpers, and we're workers. So how do you want them? What do you want them to know to engage this?
What I think is, and just I'm going to play like a debate. Well, let me tell you about my background. I went to a state university, and I majored in hotel restaurant management. So yes, I have been a dishwasher.
Okay.
And I did not work at McDonald's like Kamala Harris didn't work at McDonald's, but I have worked in restaurants. I washed dishes, I bartended, I did tables, I did everything. Cooked. I know that business, and I love that business, and I love the no tips thing. No tax, no tips.
Okay.
But no. So what's the takeaway? Look, the takeaway is again, I don't look at myself as like a fancy white shoe lawyer. I look at myself as a guy who came up from I saw my grandfather and what he struggled to do to be free, and I always sort of sided with as a kid I cast my first vote for Ronald Reagan, and I saw him speak on the day he opened his campaign at Liberty State Park on Labor Day in 1980. That's what changed my life also, seeing him make that speech and running for office. And at the end of the day, it's just citizen engagement, right? Go to the meetings, be heard. Do not be afraid to speak out. Do not be afraid of being canceled. Their biggest fear is to have to respond. And so what do they do to avoid a response is they mock you. And this is, it's the rules for radicals thing, right? You mock your opponent.
Rules for radicals.
You turn him into a cartoon of himself. And no, don't let that happen. Let them, when they turn you into a cartoon, bring your neighbor and make them turn that person into a cartoon and make them turn. They're so afraid of the people they're supposed to represent. And then they say, oh, well, you're violent. You're this. And of course you're not. You go there and you're peaceful. You state your case. You state your issues. You don't have to be a lawyer to have common sense, and common sense is really what conservatism is.
Yep.
Talk common sense. Talk to the wisdom of the farm, or the wisdom of the restaurant, or the wisdom of whatever you do.
Yeah.
You have a certain amount of wisdom and common sense, hopefully. And if you don't have common sense, then of course you're a Democrat. But that's a different story for the day. But it's really simple. It's hard to be the one to stand up and speak. It's hard to be the one to expose yourself, to show your butt to the enemy, right?
Yep.
But there's a great amount of satisfaction and power that comes with it if you do it the right way. You do it civilly, the way we're supposed to as Americans, or wherever you are. In a democratic society, or in this case, a republic, when you're speaking from your heart, from your common sense, for your family, for the values of freedom, it's very powerful. Freedom, I found, is I've done talks before on the Declaration of Independence. I used to read it every 4th of July to groups, and then I'd have a conversation about what does it all mean.
Okay.
And essentially what freedom is it's our right to, we are born with our rights. We are born as human beings. We have human rights. That's what human rights are. Our rights are the things that make us human. We speak freely. We worship. We don't worship. We worship the way we want to worship. We gather with friends. We gather property to make our lives better. We defend ourselves. These are the things you see in the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights. Government can't just intrude in our homes, that they were the kings of our castle. These are the basic needs of human beings and the basic way we operate. The government cannot take that away from us because that is innate in us, but they can repress it, and that's where you lose your freedom. When I've talked to people about what freedom is, I have lit up rooms. Like I did one to a group of college kids in a Newark school, Newark, New Jersey, inner city county college, and it was a room really is full of minority kids, mostly out of Newark and the area. And I had this conversation, and you could literally see the light bulbs going off in their heads, because they were hearing things they hadn't heard, they hadn't thought of. And freedom is exciting. I got so many great questions, and I was so excited when I was done speaking with them. And it was such a great feeling. Freedom connects us because we're all human beings, and we all understand it when we think about it and talk about it. And when you start doing that, all these policies that these people want to impose upon us, you can start seeing that those are not policies for free people. Those are policies for the oppressed and repressed. And that's what these people are afraid of, to be exposed.
So I
for
do,
us to recognize.
Right. No, you got it. I mean, you nailed it right on the head. A firm believer. I mean, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Now, what when the politics fail? And I think it was von Claus that said, war is another politics by other means. And when do you January 6th this? And they like to call this insurrection, but there was no insurrection. When do you put your foot down and say, okay, talks do us no good. Because you keep throwing out there the peaceful part. And it ain't peaceful if it ain't working.
I am a firm believer in our Constitution and our constitutional process. I think that there are very serious constitutional arguments that were being made in a nonviolent manner on January 6th. I think that there's a real question. Just because Mike Pence said it was unconstitutional doesn't mean it was unconstitutional to have an alternate slate of delegates.
Yeah.
That's an unsettled question of law. And that's what lawyers exist to do. That's why we have this system. That case should have been taken. And what happened again in those cases, a lot of times, those cases were taken. And again, the courts would say, well, it's moot because we don't have standing, you don't, and all these technical reasons. Those questions were never adjudicated. They were always thrown out. Those cases were all thrown out on technicalities. And so when you hear these debate moderators saying, well, 34 courts or whatever number it was, all said it was not true. Well, that's not true. That's not true. No court said it wasn't true. No court actually took testimony. None of them did. And ultimately, the Supreme Court never decided on this idea of alternate slates of electors. And if there was a belief of fraud, and what should have happened is that there should have been a trial where the evidence was brought out about the fraud and the alleged fraud. Okay, and the other side could have put in their opposite proofs, and there could have been a decision made by a fact finder as to whether or not there was fraud in the election. That's the system that we're supposed to have.
Right.
And that didn't happen. And so of course you get people who are upset.
Yes.
People feel their rights are being taken away because they were.
Yep.
Even if they were wrong, even if there was zero fraud, which I think is facially false. I mean, of course there was fraud at some level.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe it wasn't enough to. Who knows? I'm not gonna do that debate right now. But even if they were completely wrong, if they believed that, they should have had the opportunity, and they had some kind of good faith basis to do it. They should have been able to bring that case, and there should have been a hearing, and there should have been due process. And once you take that away, and you just call them insurrectionists, and you call the people who believe these things to be conspiracy theorists, you're doing such an incredible disservice to the American people, to the Constitution, and to our system of government.
To the idea of the way it should have been. Yeah, absolutely. Well, not a Jim Jones here, but I am drinking this Kool-Aid with you, and I'm totally getting it. I hear you 5 by 5 on this. And maybe after you get your wife's thing done, we'll have that conversation too if you want to come back on the show, because that sounds like a heck of an interesting case.
Which one? I had a lot of them.
the one that includes your wife.
Oh yeah, well sure. I mean,
I know people
that talk about it.
Yeah.
Look, I like I said, it's if anyone is in New Jersey or they want to come to New Jersey peacefully and come to a courthouse and a little town courthouse and hear a trial, you can watch me on trial defending my wife on October 11th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time in Cranford Municipal Court in New Jersey. And it's going to be an interesting day. And again, it's a fight for freedom in a civil and constitutionally proper manner.
I can only believe that there are hundreds of cases around the country that are just like yours.
Very few people have been arrested at a school board meeting.
Well, I mean, just being arrested,
it's really wild.
Not wearing the rag, the whole deal.
Yeah, we're suing multiple school boards in New Jersey and New York because what's going on at these school boards is just outrageous. What's happening in these schools is just outrageous.
My daughter-in-law is a nurse, and they says, get the jab or you're fired. And she says, well, you're going to have to terminate me. But then we started revving stuff up, and then they just kind of shut up and went away. We confronted that.
Well, good for you.
But yeah, what are we? Oh, hour one. Holy cow! This time flies. You were fascinating beyond anything.
Oh, thanks so much.
And I will get
Appreciate
this.
it.
I will get this edited up. I'll get my commercials in there, and I'll get my sponsors, and we'll do this will probably go out tonight yet. So you can. I'll send you a link directly to the phone.
That would be great. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the interview. Thanks. It was much more far-reaching than I expected.
It went out there, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It's good. It's good.
Well, good luck on your 11th there, and I hope you give him
Thanks
some
so
kung
much.
fu. And thanks for coming on. And for people out listening, yes, if this applies to something in your neighborhood, neck of the woods, country, then feel free to reach out to us. Hit us on the Facebook site. Hit us on we're all on social media. I'm not hard to find. Be well, and we'll catch you next time on Hutcast.
And that's a wrap for Hutcast. Hutcast is, again, a pragmatic approach to seeing things how some people see them. If you like our show, give us a thumbs up on the Facebook site. Again, for Hutcast, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.